basically placed it against the wheel well so that I could go around it and trace out the wheel well. I'm not going to cut this out just yet because I want to leave space for the insulation, so I'll be actually making it bigger, but I'll be able to follow the shape of it. Starting out without just stenciling, I want it to go out about here, and that's where my floor reinforcement is. And I want it to go about here because I want, again, insulation to fit underneath. So I placed the measuring from the other end, same concept, from the beam all the way down here. I've got about 40 inches. So I'm going to want to do the total frame 40 inches wide. And then we're looking at about 11 inches. Got my marker, got 40 inches from the end of the board to here. See my trace out of the wheel well going about here. So I have my 2 extra inches on the side there that I'm going to want. And I want the top to be 2 inches higher than the wheel well trace out. So I want the top to be about here. So now I just have to kind of, really it's an estimation of where I want to start having like a diagonal beam or kind of a cross beam like this, and then how tall I'm going to want that side. So I chose a pretty sharp angle here because the further I go out, the more space I lose here. And this is under the bench. Now, remember, the wheel well will be under the bench seating. So I want it to be storage. I don't want to lose all the space because of just the cover and insulation. So sharp angle here. Now what's key on the other side is I have to follow the same measurements. There's no point in me doing different slides or different lengths on both sides. So I'm going to measure this, have that be the same height here, so mark off where that height begins. And I'm going to measure my middle point of this. Once I find my middle point of the wheel well, I'll be able to measure how long I went this way and therefore mimic how long I'm going this way, and I'll have my line, basically my marker, to go for my angle to angle. So there's my trace out, kind of the darker line, which is going to be the framing, basically to hold this in place. I'm not going to cut this just yet because my framing could be off a little bit and I don't want this to be off. So I'm going to do the framing following these lines. Once it's all said and done, install it and trace it out again onto this so that I can follow. So I'm going to be using 1x2s, and I'm quite literally just going to follow my lines, mark off the lengths of these, cut them off, and hopefully once the straight part here, the straight part there is cut, I'll be able to mark off my angle using the cut pieces. So I need 2 of these and 1 of these per side, but I need 2 of them per wheel well, and I have 2 wheel wells, so 4, 8. Basically, we're looking at this dimension, that one there, and we're looking at the top one. So now I basically have to take my wood, cut out the length that it would take me here, and then putting it basically just over top of these 2 pieces of wood, I can trace underneath here the angle that I have to cut it in. Should be relatively simple. Do that twice per bar, 2 wheel wells, anyway. So we're looking at another 8 pieces. This took longer than it should have, considering I didn't have a miter saw. I have a jigsaw. Getting angles into wood with a jigsaw is not ideal, but you make do when you work in other people's driveways. I have all my pieces. Now I'm going to have to figure out how to connect them together. So having to improvise a little bit. My screws are just a little bit too long for these angles here. See them popping out a bit. I mean, you can cut them, that's not a problem, but to try to avoid that, I then started to attach my pieces on the inside instead of the outside. giving me a little bit more space to work with, to screw into. So that just means that I got to get the jigsaw back out, cut these little edges out, and by little I mean a lot, but because I did do them all the same, in theory they should still match up. And again, it's underneath the bench, it's just the wheel cover, so it's not the end of the world. All the corners are tucked in with a pocket screw. That way it's nice and flat for when I put the surface over it. Now, like I said earlier, I'm going to have to retrace what I'm doing here. And that's because, obviously, with all the angles, that after they're cut, if they're not perfect, it kind of changes it. So this will wind up being a little bit shorter than originally planned, but it'll be plenty of space anyways for the insulation in there. And, yeah, plenty of spaces in the corner to tuck everything in. So let's trace it out on this and cut it out. Get the little cardboard with basically finishing nails, like upholstery nails, or whatever you want to call these, just like IKEA furniture. Here we have the outside of the wheel well, or whatever, on the inside, whatever you want to call it. On the inside of the side of the van. And now you have the other side. Already got some pocket holes on the bottom of this thing. So we're going to go screw that straight into the floor, basically. And, yeah. We'll see how that goes. A wheel cover, a wheelbase, I don't know what you want to call it. 1, 2, nice and secure, ready to be stuffed with insulation and covered up.